Hello and welcome to another video by Rick Miracle. Me. In my series, Freemasonry and Satanism. I've been researching WTH. What the heck is going on? Since I had a big zero birthday in 2005. I guess you could say I woke up. I discovered chemtrailing, dumping stuff in the sky, amongst a lot of other things. I guess you could say I was like a lot of other people. I was pretty much asleep, oblivious to what's going on in the world. What has gone on in the world, the past, and what's probably going to happen in the future, and what's happening right now. Some big stuff in the news right now. Iran is categorically denying anything to do with shooting torpedoes, missiles, bombing any oil tankers over there. Straits of Hormuz. And it looks like when you send an aircraft carrier over there and a whole fleet of ships and a bunch of bombers, the USA, President Donald Trump, in league, of course, with Israel, NATO, and the other allies, all run by some elites who are bent on a global world order. It's all politics. And politics is the game of swaying the minds of the citizens, getting their approval. So if you want to go to a war with Iran, you've got to demonize Iran. You want to go to war with Iraq, you got to demonize Iraq. If you want to destroy all the countries in the Middle East, you have a false flag event like 9/11 and demonize all Arabs. You want to attack Russia, you demonize Russia. You want to attack China, you demonize the Chinese. Germany, demonize Germany. Mexico, put up a big fence, demonize the immigrants. Hegelian dialectic. Divide and conquer. They've been playing us for fools, and it does make me wonder, are we really fools? Will we ever wake up? Who is the real threat to humankind? Who has been behind all these world wars and other wars and revolutions and civil disturbances and economic collapses? Does it just happen naturally and nobody's to blame? Or is there verifiable proof? There are some evil forces who have been working hand in hand with each other through secret societies that bring terrorism and suffering to mankind as a tool to control mankind. Because if you didn't bring all the suffering and terrorism and threats, what would the government have to do? So you gotta have the suffering, economic, environmental, terrorism, all kinds of threats. So the people will look to the government, save me, save me, save me. And they'll look down from their high places and pretend to be saving us and how great I am to save you. When they brought the problem on in the beginning. They own the newspapers, the TVs, the movies, the banks. They have the money to pay the mercenaries, the guerrillas, the terrorists. They have the technologies. Rest of us don't. Again, what's it going to take to wake people up? Who's behind all this? I made a video on this book already. The Plot Against Christianity, Elizabeth Dilling. A nice big thick book. And when I research an author, I try to get some of the author's other books. And this was quite a controversial discussion. I'll be making more videos from this book, no doubt, eventually. So much to do, so little time. But this other book I got from her, Elizabeth Dilling, The Red Network. Elizabeth Dilling, The Who's Who and Handbook of Radicalism for Patriots. So I think I am a patriot. I care about the USA. I care about the world. And the world that I know is disappearing. The fences are up everywhere. The technologies are turning Earth into a prison planet. It looks like they're getting ready for something big. And even Albert Pike in the 1880s wrote a letter to his friend Mazzini, a high-level Freemason in Italy, saying that it would take 3 world wars to bring about the new world order, the global world order. And remember, he was into the occult, which means he was also communicating with masters, some kind of beings from behind the veil, through psychic use, channeling, however they do that. And all those rituals that the secret societies do, and in a lot of cases even sacrificing humans. In the Bohemian Grove, California, with the big redwood trees, where our leaders, politicians, and other leaders are photographed every year, they have something called the cremation of care, where they throw a baby in a fire under a giant owl, Moloch. Moloch's mentioned in the Bible, in Jeremiah, that the Lord sent King Nebuchadnezzar down from Babylon, the northeast, to destroy Jerusalem because the people there were sacrificing their sons and daughters to the demon Moloch, Baal. So I don't think anybody can have this conversation without acknowledging there are evil divine forces behind these secret societies. Yay? Nay? What do you think? I think that's the first step to admitting we have a problem. To steal a little cliche from people who have problems and need to be cured, like Alcoholics Anonymous, we have to admit we have a problem. Well, I believe we need to admit we have an ignorance problem. We have a living in the moment problem. And even a lot of that channeled material from those entities communicating through people, like Esther Hicks channeling Abraham, Jane Roberts channeling Seth, Lee Carroll channeling Cryon, etc., 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 and the Law of One, and Aleister Crowley communicating with that being that looks like a gray alien, Lamb, Iowas, in the Law, Book of the Law, and Aleister Crowley, known as the evilest man alive. The Book of the Law has one law: do as thou wilt. There's no commandments, there's no restrictions. If you feel like doing it, you should be able to do it. Complete opposite of what I would consider Christianity. So, saying all that, and then getting this book. So this is going to be series 169, part 2. So like I said, I try to keep the authors and their different books together. In some cases I do, some cases they're just so different, or so many. I have 2 different series number for different authors. Just the way it unfolded. Some of them I'm meshing together, because I used to just have book review 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and maybe 5 of them were on one particular book. And later on, as this thing evolved, me making videos and doing my research, I try to reshuffle and organize. Make sense? I did not know where I would wind up in this when I started. I just knew something wasn't right. So what are you talking about when you're talking about the Red Network? And a who's who, and a handbook of radicalism for patriots. So if I go to the very front of this book, the Red Network, so that would mean the communists were known as the Reds. And the communism was created by the Bolshevik Jewish people, and other people, Marxism, and apparently the people behind that, according to the Encyclopedia Judaica, by the way, these disruptions and revolutions in countries where they even beheaded kings, like the King of Britain and the King of France. In the Encyclopedia Judaica, it says it is one of the characteristics of the Jewish peoples to be behind the revolutions, the instigators. the planners, the financiers. So you're mixing the Illuminati, the Rothschilds, with the money, the Freemasons, with the secret societies, and the Zionists, and the communists, and the banksters, and the fascism. So you got that with the Reds. So all these things going on, revolutionary attitudes, divide and conquer. We can say that the occult, the Kabbalah, the Rothschilds, the secret societies, communists, Zionism, fascism, all these organizations are all one. I say one because they all figure towards a star, a deity at the top. Satan, Lucifer, Moloch, Baal, Ra, Isis, Horus, the all-seeing eye on the dollar bill. So pagan means many gods. So with these secret societies, it could all be one evil entity or numerous entities together like the fallen angels. And people all over the world have different names for these entities. But apparently they do like manipulating and controlling mankind, even bringing nation against nation, killing each other. You know, maybe it's entertainment for them. So anyways, in the introduction to Elizabeth Dilling's book, The Red Network, it says here it's dedicated to the professional patriots, without committing them to its statements. This book is admirably dedicated to all those sincere fighters for American liberty and Christian principles who, because of their opposition to the Red propaganda and the new socialist order of Marx and Lenin, are denounced as a professional patriots, super patriots, 100% patriots, and Tories by their red-up opponents. Particularly mention is gratefully made to those patrioteers who have aided and encouraged the author in her effort to bring to the sound but still sleeping portion of the American public the truth about the communist, socialist, world conspiracy, which with its four horsemen, atheism, immorality, class hatred, pacifism, for the sake of the Red Revolution, is boring within our churches and schools and government, and is undermining America like a cancerous growth. Among these are the national headquarters of the staunch DAR, of which the author, unfortunately, is not a member, which reprinted each article in her former pamphlet, Red Revolution, and sent copies to each chapter of the USA. The DAR members are the best informed body of women in America on this subject, and are correspondingly detested by the Reds. So the DAR, I'm not quite sure who they are, but apparently it's an organization of women trying to get the information about communism out there to the public. Senator Clayton R. Lusk, whose gift is the most valuable and complete 4,450-page volume report on the Joint Legislative Committee of the State of New York investigating seditious activities. A report based upon the indisputable documentary evidence made by the committee, which he headed, has been made available. The background and information concerning the Red movement up to the year 1920, when it was issued, which is incorporated within this book. So 1920, Senator Clayton R. Rusk, the Joint Legislative Committee, did a report on seditious activity in the United States, maybe the world, and it was 4,450 pages in 1920. Now, there's a lot of significant information right there. One, communism was very strong in 1920. That's right after World War I. which ended, I think, in 1917, late 16, started in 1914. So it wasn't a very long war. And incidentally, World War I started 6 months after December 21st, 2013, when the Jewish elite in America and the Rothschilds, Rockefellers, all those folks, Zionist leaders, banksters, who were trying to coerce President Taft and previous presidents for a couple things. Supporting them in their attempt to get the Palestinians land for a homeland. And another one was controlling the American money supply, controlling the banking system, the Federal Reserve, which is not federal. So the other presidents denied them. A couple presidents were assassinated, poisoned. But they did say, okay, we'll put a man in. We have so much power. And they put Woodrow Wilson in the presidency. And within a short time, they had created the Federal Reserve on Christmas holiday when nobody else was in Washington, D.C. Everybody was on Christmas vacation. December 21st, 1913, and World War I started 6 months later in Europe. I say, if they didn't take over the USA money supply and put in their man Woodrow Wilson, they probably could not have initiated and executed World War I. And after World War I, they managed to get a bunch of espionage people into Russia, abduct the Tsar and his family, and begin what they called the Russian Revolution, where they apparently, some stories say, killed up to 100 million Christians and destroyed the Christian churches. Russia was predominantly Orthodox Christian. And this was done by the Bolshevik Jewish people. So over 10 to 11, 12, 13, 14 years, they killed up to 100 million people after World War I. So what's that time period? 1914 to 16, World War I, 1917 to 20, right here in this book, just 3 years. Apparently, they were mass immigrating a bunch of the Yiddish Jews from that area, Poland, Ukraine, formerly of the Khazars, Yiddish Jewish people into the United States, and communism was spreading like wildfire. So when I look at the date here, 1920, and then you talk about 1930 and 1940, World War II is almost 20 years away. A lot was going on. And a lot of people were involved in high places working against Christianity and the sovereignty of the United States of America, which apparently was lost when they took over controlling the money supply. Back to the book. Lieutenant Nelson E. Hewitt, a super expert patriot who has devoted 12 years of his life to active statistical work and study on red subversion, communists, which is also the Zionist, and created by the Illuminati, high-level Freemasons, secret societies, into the Synagogue of Satan and Lucifer cults, as Albert Pike admitted. And I did notice when I went and looked up the pro-communist posters in America back then, I found a link on the Yahoo image site, and I noticed they use the 5-pointed star everywhere on these reds, these communists. So I have a little video I made that I'll show later on in this video about those posters and the star, which seems to be turning up quite a few places, just like the 6-pointed star on the Israeli flag. So the way I understand it, the 5-pointed star and the 6-pointed star can be used interchangeably for their deity, the fallen star. If you want to call it Lucifer, Baal, Moloch, Satan, whatever the different names they use. They use the 5-pointed star right side up and upside down, and the 6-pointed star, which represents the fallen angel Rephaim, and the demon god Moloch, the big owl or bull that they sacrifice humans to. Just saying, You ought to know who's behind the Reds, the communists, apparently the Zionists, and not all Jews are involved in this. According to Eustace Mullins, 50% of the Jewish people worldwide back then were opposed to communism. In Germany. So the Zionists had a huge problem. Apparently, a homeland for, according to the historic religion of the now called Jewish people, and the word Jew didn't come about until the beginning of the 17th century, including also anti-Semitism was invented for the same person. But they never had a word called Jew, J-E-W. So when you talk about the kingdom of Judea, back during Christ's time, and all the way back towards Moses' time, 1,000 years before that, the kingdom of Judea, or the land of Canaan, or now called the Palestine land, and now that's even disappearing, it's called Israel. But there were many different religious cults, if you want to call them that, religious groups. And Jesus was born of the Essenes, and the group that had him crucified were the Pharisees, a totally different religious group. So when they tried to tell you Jesus was a Jew, number one, the word Jew didn't exist 300 years ago. Number two, the Pharisees crucified Jesus, who was in it from the Essenes. So what you're talking about, if he was a Jew from Judea, he's from a kingdom which had many different religions. It's like trying to say that, I'm a Christian, so all Americans are Christians. You'd say that's crazy. There's atheists, there's Jewish people, there's Islamic people, pagan natives with shamans, and Buddhists and Hindus. America. Lots of different religious groups, and a lot of people who are just atheists and don't care and don't believe in anything. America. Same thing with South America and Canada and Africa, all kinds of cults. So the ancient kingdom of Judea, the bottom line is, did not have one Jewish religion. There was no such word as Jew. Apparently, there were some people, according to Eustace Mullins, not me, that were bandits back then, way back then, and they were called cutthroats and bandits, and in apparently their language, the word for that is Hebrews. Just like we call maybe people robbing people outlaws, back then the cutthroats and bandits were called Hebrews. And apparently the kingdom of Khazar, which is Ukraine, Poland, that whole area, adopted the religion of these people who called themselves Jews, which were the cutthroats and the bandits, according to Eustace Mullins. If you go on archive.org, and I did make a couple clips of him saying this, and he's a famous author, and he said in his many books, I think he died in 2010, that none of his work has ever been disputed or claimed to be false. So it is what it is. The bandits and the cutthroats have control of our world, and apparently they're into the occult, Kabbalah, mysticism, and some kind of demonic worship and sacrificing animals and humans. Short story, those would be also the people that are called the communists. And apparently in 1920 it was a huge threat to the world. And even here's Senator Clayton Lusk, 4,450-page report by the Joint Legislative Committee for the State of New York investigating seditious activities. Clear enough. Might be a good idea if we know who we're dealing with. So you got Lieutenant Nelson Hewitt, a super expert patriot who has devoted 12 years of his life to active statistical work, study on red subversion activities, who edits the Advisory Associates weekly bulletin, which every super patriot needs, P.O. Box 403 Chicago, and who has given the greatest personal aid of all, having devoted a number of full days of his time to checking and supplying information used in this book. Wow. Nice size book. The Red Network. Francis Ralston Welch, Philadelphia attorney and research expert on subversion activities, a real super patriot, who has sent many excellent reports. 1920. We're talking about 2020 here in a few months. This is June 2019. Oh my. Looking back 100 years. And it looks like these forces are still busy behind World War I, World War II, 9/11, and so much more. And whenever they want to treat the people poorly because they're not cooperating with the global world order, they crash the economy or create a shooting or a bombing using politics, swaying the minds of the public. What's interesting, when you read this stuff, you can't really stay completely unemotional or get a little angry when you consider the death and the suffering that's happened in the last 100 years. You can't avoid not getting concerned and saying, okay, if they do it and they do it and they do it and they do it and they're sending ships over to Iran right now, today, threats in the news, press releases, routers, Associate Press. That means they're in the middle of moving forward like a freight train, bringing us this global world order. The peaceful, beautiful day around me today could all be destroyed and disturbed this afternoon. Somebody could come running out of the house and say, "You got to see what's on TV." They're bombing the smithereens out of the Iranians. And Russia's threatened to retaliate with nuclear missiles. And China says they're going to join Russia. All this has been in the news lately. And Brazil is joining that axis because of what America's doing to Venezuela. Honduras last week was burning the embassy in Honduras, the USA embassy. So it is happening right now, all around us. But it seems peaceful. It's a beautiful day in June in the mountains of North Carolina. But just like 9/11, what were you doing? I was in a meeting, and they had nominated me president of my association that day. And we were going to have a vote to make me president of my business association. Some guy come running into the big lodge room in Orlando, Florida, and said, "You got to come see the TV. Come quick." And we watched 9/11. So they didn't vote me president that day, but the next month at our meeting, they did make me president of my business association. So I remember where I was that day. So Lieutenant Nelson Hewitt, super expert, devoting 12 years of his life, active statistical work and study of red subversion activities. He's given the greatest number of his hours, his time, in his life to supplying information used in this book. And Francis Welch, Philadelphia attorney, has sent many excellent reports. Miss Margaret Kerr, executive secretary of the Professional Patriots Beta American Foundation, which placed and has kept the criminal syndicalism law on the statute books of California, despite the frantic efforts of the Reds to repeal it. Who has sent valuable data. Mr. Walter Steed, manager of the 100 Percenters, National Republic magazine, Washington, D.C., and author of its articles on subversion activities which are unsurpassed, who has sent excellent special information. All patrioteers need the National Republic. Its price is $2 yearly. So all these organizations in America, patrioteers, patriots, Mr. Harry Young, a professional patriot of the American Vigilant Intelligence Federation, significantly annoying in his anti-red free speech, to be honored by intimidating libel suits filed by the notorious Free Speech for Reds Only. Free Speech for Reds Only were filing lawsuits against these people who were proclaiming their intentions and activities. The ACLU, whose Chicago office is the office of its member, Karl Hessler, of the Communist School of Red Revolution and the Reds Federal Press, Mr. Young kindly loaned the author some documents. Mr. John B. Chappell, editor of the Ashland, Wisconsin Press, author of La Faute Socialism, etc., whose courageous exposure in the face of death threats of the Socialist Communist Network in Wisconsin defeated the Lafayette dynasty in the 1932 election for the first time in 40 years, who sent his helpful book and pamphlets to the author. So people fighting the communists back then, the 20s and 30s, were not above death threats. Apparently Eustace Mullins had a assassination contract put out on him. If you go on archive.org and put in Eustace Mullins, you'll find all his videos and pamphlets and essays and books. And in one of them I was reading that he talks about the hit that was put out on him. So if they can't shut you up by legal means, discrediting you, setting you up for a crime, creating laws saying it's hate speech to talk about these things, then they can resort to hiring an assassin to take you out. This is who and what we are dealing with. Those who have assembled large and distinctive audiences to hear the author's lectures, among them Paul Armstrong, Vice Commander, Department of Illinois, American Legion, and many other valiant Legion commanders, U.S. Army, Navy Officers Club, the men of the Chicago Military Intelligence, leaders of the Illinois Federation of Women's Club, Moody Church and the Bible Institute, Women's Patriotic League, Catholic organizations, fundamentalist, and other anti-Bolshevik, anti-atheist churches, clubs, community mass meetings, etc. So the Bolshevik Jews who went into Russia after World War I and apparently proceeded to kill up to 100 million Christians. Russia was Orthodox Christian. So was Germany Orthodox Christian. So was America Orthodox Christian. So Christianity has been under attack, and they've been using mind control, propaganda, deception, social conditioning to change people from the direction of a morality-natured society to an immorality-natured society. Clear enough? Colonel Sidney Story, lecturer and fiery patriot, W.H. Cheesebrough, Wisconsin commander of the GAR, Maud Howell of the Canadian Christian Crusade Against Atheism, Nestor Webster, world-famous English historian and author of Surrender of an Empire, World Revolution, and French Revolution. So YouTube did delete my video on Nestor Webster's book, World Revolution. I don't think I have the one, Surrender of an Empire. I'll have to try to get that. But a week or so ago, YouTube took down 25 of my videos, and almost all of them had something to do with Zionism. So apparently they do control the internet and everything else in this country, which a lot of us already know. And they can call it hate speech by trying to expose those people who wish to resist the anti-God coming global world order. Anti-God coming global world order. Where anything goes. Pansexualism. That means sex with anything. Pansexualism. Bisexualism. Transgenderism. Etc., etc. Rainbow Coalition. New Age materials. Has the rainbow colors also. You get it? Got it. My friends Mr. and Mr. George Creeders, residents of Soviet Russia. While Mr. Creeders was employed there as an engineer, Mr. John Waters, also a former engineer of the Soviet government, whose true story entitled Red Justice is available at 50 cents, Madison, Wisconsin. Miss Crawford Wells, famous lecturer and author of The Kaput, a graphic account of the Russian experience. Mr. C.D. Shipley, tireless patriotic worker in Waukegan, Illinois, a red stronghold. So the Reds were firmly entrenched in Illinois. Where did Obama come out of? The Chicago area. So she writes a book called Kaput. So I guess America is going to be kaput if we don't wake up. After reading the author's pamphlet, Red Revolution, David Kinley, the brilliant and loyal American president emeritus of the University of Illinois, wrote in part, I congratulate you on your clear and earnest exposition of the situation, and I quite agree with you that it is time something were done to prevent the evil influence of the advocates of communism and their allies. The allies include a good many people who would refuse to be called communist, but whose influence, through various associations, tends to strengthen the work and claims of that group. I agree with you that it is time that parents should look more closely at the influence of the teachers, of the schools and the colleges which their children attend. And let's not forget that right now they are seriously sexualizing young children. California, they passed a law for that they're going to be able to teach, I guess mandatory, first graders to sixth grade, explicit sexual education, which probably involves oral sex or transgenderism and homosexuality and lesbian and bisexuality and pansexuality. Everything's okay. Little first graders, 6 years old, 7 years old, 9 years old, 8 years old. Do you really think that these people should be teaching that or telling that to our children? I think not. But if I disagree with what they're doing in the world today, I guess that would be called hate speech, because I'm opposing their anti-God global world order. So who's really the hater? Who's done all the murders? It weren't the Christians doing all the murders. It was the secret society's Illuminati communist Zionist, as it says in the Encyclopedia Judaica. And of course, it wasn't all Jewish people. 50% of them are Orthodox, God-fearing Jewish people. They were the target of a lot of attacks by the 50% world population of the Zionist Jews, who had a very strong leadership. So it does make one wonder, if there were a lot of Jews killed in Germany during World War II, who killed them and which ones were killed? It looks like the Zionist Jewish elite, which financed Hitler and put him in power, by the way, and had a problem with the other 50% of the Orthodox Jews in Germany and the whole area who did not want to leave and go live in the desert. Do you blame them? So they had to be dealt with, and dealt with harshly, and anti-Semitism had to be created and brought about everywhere, like they're doing now. Even recently, bombing a bunch of Jewish religious facilities and saying anti-Semitism was on the rise, and finding out it was an American Jewish boy who had moved from the United States to Israel who had made the bomb threat phone calls. I showed that in a previous video. So they do use the false flags propaganda for political purposes to sway the minds of we the people, to deceive us, to lie to us, to cheat us out of our freedom, and trying to destroy people's souls by believing in the dark side and joining forces with the dark side, even getting the evil decadent tattoos and graffiti and lifestyle, bragging and saying it's so great to be rebellious against those Christian haters. Oh my. When will the minds of the men and women on earth wake up? And when I read from this book in a few minutes, after I get through with the opening, you decide for yourself. Go get the book. Look up Elizabeth Dilling on archive.org. I bet you can find all of this for free. Mr. and Mrs. James Watt of Chicago declared, "From a viewpoint gained through our recent residence of 15 months in an American engineering colony in Soviet Russia, the statements of Mrs. Albert Dilling concerning conditions prevalent in that country are found to be absolutely authentic and of invaluable import." So she tells a lot here in this book I made a video on, The Plot Against Christianity. She went over to Russia after World War I. And I said between World War I and World War II, there are many documents and investigations that say up to 100 million Christians were killed in Russia. The Christian church is destroyed, but not the Jewish temples. And the Bolshevik Jewish people who invaded the country and took over were, of course, Jewish, but not of the Orthodox Jewish flavor, which believe in God and believe that they're supposed to have their kingdom come created by a miracle from God, where the Zionist Jews say, we're not waiting, we have control of the world, we have the money, we can fight and deceive and buy our way through this. And apparently they are, and they have. And it's not over yet. When it is over, people will surely know it. Think of the Hunger Games movie, Divergent, Mad Max, and so much more. May professional patriots increase, multiply. May they cease to be lone voices crying in the wilderness. May their numbers and activities grow strong enough to avert now threatening socialism or fascism, and to preserve American Christianity and the American Constitution and the American liberty. It says here, see professional patriots under organization herein. So the table of contents, let me read this, and then I want to show a clip of that Yahoo image search back then in the 1920s on the pro-communist posters in America. Quite surprising. The stuff you find when you just keep on going, researching. And here she says, may professional patriots increase and multiply. And we certainly need some patriots in America now to stop what's coming, this global world order. I mean, why would President Donald Trump send an aircraft carrier and a whole fleet of ships off the coast of Iran? And the other day, apparently, they're saying Iran sent a couple missiles at a couple oil tankers. Why would Iran do that? I think they're stupid. Like Assad, the leader of Syria, that claims that he's gassing his people, so they start bombing the smithereens out of Assad's territories. Why would he gas his people? Do you know if the world perception, politics, believed that, then the whole world would go there and attack Syria. The same thing with Iran. They've been calling for the destruction of Iran since 9/11. Even Wesley Clark, the former leading general in the Pentagon, mentions all this. You can look it up on YouTube videos. So you just got to understand what they want to do, and the false flags are the tools to fool the people. So it says here on the table of contents, miscellaneous articles, Russian Revolution, do you want to hear it? Have we recognized Russia? Oh, let them blow off steam, as they do in England. Communist organization in the USA, Red Army in the USA, Communist Party and religion, Social Party and religion, women and socialism, Christian socialism, Methodist turned socialist news, jail or asylum. Gandhi, Glenn Frank, Einstein, Jane Addams, Bromley, Oxum, Carl Hessner, Red Riverna. I am not interested. So-called pacifism. Is it Christian or red? Pacifism and its red aides. Social Party and the New Deal. The New Deal and Roosevelt appointees. Capitalism, Hewer, Chesler, and the American greatness, fascism. Who's Who and Radicalism is in this book. Organization, Who's Who, miscellaneous articles. First page here. Russian Revolution. Do we want it here? So 100 years later, here we are. If they do bring about a revolution here, dividing this country 50-50 between the anti-God, atheist, and Church of Satan, which is growing, against the Christians and other decent family values. I don't care if they're Hindu, Buddhist, Muslim. The people who want normalcy and family values. This is the battle. And the people that are on the dark side, the satanic side, the atheist side, the New Age side, the Rainbow Coalition side, all of that, the anti-Christian, they believe the propaganda and the deception. And of course you got a lot of Christians and other good people who are just looking at, with bewilderment, that these people would be buying the anti-God propaganda, social conditioning, hook, line, and sinker. It's beyond comprehension. With that said, check out this next video clip when I went on Yahoo image site and looked at some posters back then. Can you imagine? You're walking down a city street in Chicago, New York, whatever town, and there's these posters. 1920. Hello and welcome to another Yahoo image search. And lordy, lordy, the things you can find if you just look. And I think I have a little surprise. So the word I looked up today, words, pro-communist American posters. Now the communists are a religious, anti-religious, religious, that's crazy, right? An anti-religious, religious, anti-God, anti-Christian organization. Apparently, according to Eustace Mullins, fascism, communism, Zionism was created by the Illuminati, bankster, Jewish Rothschilds family in the early 1700s. Apparently, prior to the 1700s, they didn't even have the word Jew, J-E-W. There was no such thing. There was a kingdom of Judea, which had many different religious organizations. Jesus came from the Essenes, and the ones who crucified Jesus were the Pharisees. Two different religious organizations, FYI. What does that have to do with this? Well, I think it's the Pharisees and their religion, which is anti-religious. I know that sounds crazy, but remember in the Bible, Jesus said, "Ye are of your father Satan." And here's some communist posters, and according to Eustace Mullins, the communists, Zionists, fascists, and other parties were created by the Illuminati secret societies, which created the Freemasons from the older Freemasonic organizations that were actually builders. Operative instead of speculative. So all this is connected. And one of the things that connects it, this is the surprise, is the five-pointed star. Crush capitalism, create communism. The five-pointed star with the sickle. Let's not forget China, Vietnam, Korea, all over Asia. nuking Japan. Is this tomorrow? America under communism. How apropos that a poster from way back then, and if I click the link, Yahoo will not let me back to the image search, and I'll show you that later. They want me to sign some kind of an agreement, and it's apparently a disagreeable agreement to me. Join the Communist Party, this way to progress. And you've heard the word progressive and liberal. It's not what you think. 5-pointed star. Motherland, fatherland, comrades unite. Long live the workers. So they're using the workers to destroy the governments and the federations and republics all over the world. They deceive us with democracy because, one, they deceive the people, and so the people vote for things they know not what they vote for. Appreciate America. In unity, there is strength. 5-pointed star all over this guy. Red for courage, white for honor, blue for justice. American propaganda posters for World War II. Comrades unite. And apparently Russia, communism, created by the Rothschild Illuminati secret societies, which is also Zionism today, where they want to rebuild King Solomon's temple, represented by the red octopus, plans on controlling the whole world. How communism works, 5 cents. I'll have to get that pamphlet. So they want the workers to be against the factory owners, promising that the people will be well off under socialism, i.e. communism, which is the same as the Zionists controlling the world, the secret societies, which is anti-Christian, anti-religion. But on the other hand, the 5-pointed star is telling us they're pro-Satanist. The city that stopped Hitler, heroic Stalingrad. I guess they plan on turning all of Europe red. Here's a man down in Spain beating a guy with a club. Here's another man choking somebody in France. They're whipping somebody here, choking somebody here, hanging somebody here. Boy, they're telling us that the Reds are going to kill people everywhere. Look at this. There's your rainbow colors. Pride. Way back then. Get it? You wonder where this stuff came from. The red iceberg. Poland, Hungary, North Korea, East Germany, Czechoslovakia, China. So you got a big communist hand squashing a U.S. soldier with a bomb. Propaganda posters. The sun's rays, look at that. Even on the Obama poster, they have the sun's rays. A lot of the corporate logos, sun's rays. On the back of the dollar bill with the all-seeing eyes, the sun's rays. This one says communism is a lie. Of course it's a lie. But notice the 5-pointed star again and again and again. And it is an anti-God organization. Communism is a fight for freedom. They want to free you from religious beliefs. Free you from God. I wonder who wants you then? Communism, America's mortal enemy. And apparently they now control us. For a free, happy, prosperous America. Communism is Americanism of the 20th century. How many people know this stuff? 5-pointed star on the red's head, right here. You get it? These people are anti-religion. And apparently between World War I and World War II, with the Bolshevik Jewish invasion into Russia, all planned by the elites, by the way, after World War I, when Russia was off guard and weakened, the Tsar and his family were abducted, taken to a farmhouse, and executed. And they were destroying the Christian churches and killing up to 100 million Christians in Russia between World War I and World War II. So some reports say. Some reports say 60 million, 25 million. I don't think it really matters. The idea, it was in the millions. And it is the Reds with the 5-pointed star. You can protect yourself from radioactive fallout. Get the facts from your civil defense director. Wonderful. All this hoo-ha for communism, anti-God. Is this tomorrow, America under communism? Wall Street belongs to us. Let the U.S. days of rage begin. Occupy Wall Street. So you can see the communism connection to these things, and the 5-pointed star. And they recruited the black people in America, promising them that they would be elevated if they could assist in this revolution. And of course, after these revolutions, it never gets better for the working people. It's all a lie. They are of the darker. They are the foreigners. They are everywhere. I want your job. No one can contain us. Revolutionary Conservative Party. It's a free country. Propaganda posters. Propaganda posters. Look at this guy with the club, with the ball with the spikes on it. A 5-pointed star. Do you get it? America under socialism, factory closed. Look behind the mask. Communism is death. Death is with the 5-pointed star. Ghost City. Fight the Red Menace. Children's crusade against communism. Nameless, shameless women. I married a communist. Trying to see if Humphrey Bogart was in this one. Apparently not. How and what to tell a communist. Invasion USA. Communism, the beginning of a new stage. A manifesto from the Revolutionary Communist Party USA. The Red Menace is real. Report all suspected communist activities. Well, I guess we'd have to report our leaders for sure. A constitutional libertarian, pro-communist, anti-American. Propaganda at UMass Amherst on September 11th. Can you see it? Can you see it? Got a devil face behind this Dr. McBurney. Communism is coming. Be vigilant. Can you see it? 5-pointed star on the skull's head. Can you see it? Look up Freemasonry and see the 5-pointed star. I'm beginning to catch on to this stuff more and more. When you pirate MP3s, you're downloading communism. Recording industry, restoration of America. There's a 6-pointed star on the Israeli flag, with the 5-pointed star on the helmet of this man on fire. So you can connect. They are interchangeable. The 6-pointed star on the Israeli flag stands for Moloch, or the fallen angel Rephaim, with the 5-pointed star, Satanism, Lucifer. America betrayed. The tragic consequences of the Reds on the government payroll. Socialism, 5-pointed star. Communism. And these stars are upside down, clearly indicating Satanism. The rays behind the sickle and the hammer. Oh boy, look at this little cartoon. A new attitude to labor is planned. Everyone to his own ability, regardless of race, age, sex, or personal desire. Slackers are forbidden. Get back to work. We'll tell you when to drink water. Lateness is sabotage. So if he's pointing to a clock. I'm too sick to go to work. Absenteeism is treason. You have no reason for sick people. We have no room for sick people. They're shooting the guy. The guns. Under a system, a new world order is forming. Oh my goodness. Please, please, please go to pro-communist American posters and see this for yourself. Here's two men, apparently together, with the 5-pointed star. And the two children, the boys. Looks like they're pro-gay. That's what the link said, not me. This is tomorrow. Looks like he's about to grab a church with his hand. That's a church with a steeple here. Be a tightwad. Keep the wad. Loose spenders are always in tight corners. Save your surplus. Own something. Five-pointed star on his hat. Blood is the harvest. Five-pointed star on his hat. Blood is the harvest. They're called the red. Blood is red. Do you get it? They're deceiving the worker people. Now we can see it in the streets everywhere. Here's somebody crushing the White House. with a 5-pointed star on his head. Pay attention to the 5-pointed stars. And drive down around your neighborhood and see if you can see the big barn star on people's houses. That's what it means. Forward to a new Soviet America. People just don't believe it. 5-pointed star. You, shut your mouth. We'll bomb who we want. You're either with us or you're with the terrorist. Sounds like George Bush Jr. I guess there's Stalin burning Germany. Bolshevism on the bottom here. Remember, between World War I and World War II, the communist, Bolshevik, Zionist, fascist, capitalist elite, not the capitalist citizens or the Christian citizens, but the people who control the capitalisms, the banking system, which would be the Illuminati Rothschilds since 1913. Communism, America's mortal enemy. It truly is. And apparently they do have a good grip on this country, and they're convincing a lot of people to be anti-God. Well, all I can say is go on to Yahoo image site, look up pro-communist American posters, and be amazed. Be shocked. Maybe be afraid. Be afraid. Pride, rainbow colors. Now you know who's behind it. Thank you for watching my little word review. Rick Miracle reporting. So did you know about those posters? Something weird happening with Yahoo lately. When I do my research, they keep interrupting me and actually not allowing me to move around on that page any further, look at anything else. They want me to agree to some kind of oath. And it has something in that oath about racial discrimination and all kinds of other clauses. If I use the Yahoo search site and the information, I have to agree to some kind of oath, some kind of legal arbitration thing, and pretty much they're going to try to shut us all up. So I was reading this book, The Red Network, and I came to this particular chapter. Socialism that is socialism is not Christian. Excuse me. Socialism that is Christian is not socialism. Socialism that is Christian is not socialism. There is an epigram to the effect that the socialism is Christian only insofar as it is not socialism, and socialism only insofar as it is not Christian. So these communist groups try to hijack other accepted groups, like Christianity. And right now, of course, is the Judeo-Christian propaganda, social conditioning in the news all the time. Judeo-Christian relation. Zionist Christians. Now think about that for a minute. It was the Pharisees who had Jesus Christ crucified. The Pharisees appear to be down the line the people now called the Zionists, and into different kinds of pagan cults, bringing us all these secret societies. So they crucified Jesus 2,000 years ago, but they're trying to fool everybody now. You know, they could probably come up with a term like communist Christians, Zionist Christians, Christian socialists. They play games, and people don't know what the truth is. So let's listen to Elizabeth Dilling and see if we can make some sense out of this. Modern predatory socialism despises and ridicules as only sham socialism the religious, purely voluntarily associations for cooperative production, which were formed in England subsequent to 1848 by the Christian groups calling themselves socialist. Dr. Robert Flint says of these Christian socialists, they did not teach a single principle or doctrine particular to socialism, but rather by their ethical and religious fervor struck at the very roots of socialism. They had no quarrel with the existing social system. As such, they gave no countenance to projected raids on land and capital. They utterly rejected the doctrine that character and destiny are determined by the materialistic circumstances. Above all, they repudiated with abhorrence the idea of a class war and the ferocious savagery of the Communist Manifesto of Marx and Engels. So you do know that the communists have confiscated the term socialism, and they are anti-Christian. Dr. C.E. Raven's Christian Socialism tells the pathetic but ridiculous story of 41 of these community enterprises, all of which failed disastrously and failed in a short time. So they were creating these Christian socialist organizations, and apparently the people were not stupid. The organizations failed. He illustrates and specifies as causes of their uniform collapse the vicious principle of equality of reward irrespective of output or ability, lack of business capacity, quarrels and indiscipline, greed, dishonesty, slackness, inefficiency. It was said, for example, you could always tell a Christian socialist by the cut of the corporate trousers. When the incentive of competition and private profit is removed, only compulsion remains as the driving force. So they were trying to say, the Christian socialist, that it didn't matter. Everybody was completely equal with people who have a lack of business capacity, quarrels, indiscipline, greedy people, dishonest people, slackness, inefficiency. So all these people who are probably rejected by society, thieves and lazy people, it doesn't matter what you are, you're equal to everybody else. And of course, all those people who were slack and lazy and greedy and what it says here, like to fight and all that, would join in on that program, get something for nothing. When the incentive of competition and private profit is removed, only compulsion remains as a driving force. Without dictatorship and force, any form of socialism collapses. Remember that. Without dictatorship or force, socialism collapses. As socialist communist G.B. Shaw has said, compulsory, sorry I get the words mixed up a few times here, compulsory labor, people being forced to work. And that's what's going to happen when they collapse capitalism. People better know that. Think of the Hunger Games movie. I keep mentioning it. Compulsory labor with death as the final punishment is the keystone to socialism. And that's from the Fabians, track number 51, 1906. So when they bring us this social world order, this global world order, and you think you can get away with calling in sick or playing hooky, the punishment is death. Just saying. It's time to wake up. F.J.C. Hernshaw, in Survey of Socialism, 1929, says, "It is a profound truth, seen equally clear with keen-sighted Christians and by keen-sighted socialists, that the principle of religion of love are wholly incompatible with the only operative form of socialism." So the philosophy of love is incompatible with socialism. And if they do create a society where they have forced socialism, compulsory labor, if you don't do your share, the punishment is death. That which incites the proletariat, the working people, to attack all other classes, which seeks to drag down the preposterous to the level of the base, to drag down the prosperous to the level of the base, which lust for confiscation of capital, which projects the extermination of landowners. So if the communist socialists take over the world, they will confiscate everything and drag down the prosperous to the level of the base. Everybody will be poor. That's happening these days. The middle class is disappearing. It's in the news all the time. And even the homeowners are disappearing. Renters are increasing. I think renters, long as you're toeing the line and going to your job down there, maybe at the cell phone company or some kind of factory, long as you're toeing the line, you can afford to pay your rent. But should you decide you're going to go off and be an artist and do something that you want to do, move to another state, and you don't have money to pay the rent or the right credit rating, you're not going to be able to rent by the corporate-owned rental units everywhere. It is going that way. Extermination of landowners, which envisions the eradication of competition by the reintroduction of slavery under the criminal dictatorship. In their strictest sense, Christianity and socialism are irreconcilable, said the Reverend T.W. Brussel in a recent Bampton lecture. It is a profound truth that socialism is the natural enemy of religion, echoed by the British Socialist Party in its official manifesto. Marxism sublimated robbery into restitution. So that's what they're going to call it, restitution, robbery. When they take over and take everything they have, they're going to call it restitution, like they do over in Europe now, since World War II is over. Restitution. It enabled the incunarious to regard themselves as disinherited, the ne'er-do-wells as the defrauded, the unsuccessful as the oppressed, and the unskilled as wage slaves, and the incompetent as exploited, the unemployed as the sole creators of wealth and value, the proletariat, the working people, as the people, and the violent revolution arises as vindicators of the rights of man. So all the people who are oppressed will join in the revolution, and this is what they do all the time. Look what they did in France with that revolution, and the recent revolution in the Ukraine, and of course destroying Iraq, Afghanistan. It never gets better for the people. They say they're going to take down an evil dictator. But go pay attention. 20 years later almost, they're still bombing the smithereens out of those countries. Poor people. Marxian socialism is potent just because of its appeal to the primitive individuals of the subnormal man. So Marxism socialism is attractive to the subnormal man. And they're trying to make the young people and many other people subnormal these days. We've all seen them. They look like freaks. And they brag that they want to remain weird and freaks. And I don't mind people doing what they want to do. But I think a lot of it is controlled social conditioning and propaganda with a very evil end in sight. So it seems. All right, continuing on. So it says here, Marxian socialism is potent just because of its appeal to the primitive individualism and the subnormal man. It excites his passion to plunder. It stimulates his love of fighting. It bemuses his rudimentary conscience, making him believe that he is out for justice and not out for loot. It muddles his immature mind with ineffable nonsense concerning complicated economic theories of valuable and surplus trade. Surplus value. Of the potency and efficiency of its appeal, there can be no doubt. It is the only really effective type of socialism in existence. It entirely supersedes its utopian predecessors, for they postulate self-sacrifice and hard work and depict an ideal community which provides in its own modest sustenance for cooperative toil. A most unattractive paradise to a caveman. Only Marxian socialism offers brigandage, systemized, rationalized, moralized, glorified. Hence, as Thorsten Verbel says, the socialism that inspires hope and fears today is the school of Marx. No one is seriously apprehensive of any other so-called socialist movement. In proportion as the movement in any given community grows in mass, maturity, and conscious purpose, it unavoidably takes on more consistently Marxian complexion. Socialists of all countries gravitate towards the theoretical position that avowed Marxism. So too Clayton, modern socialism is Marx, and Marx is modern socialism. There is no other foundation. Professor Eli concludes, in socialism, Karl Marx occupies a position, all going before him in a manner preparing the way for him, and all coming after him, taking him from a starting point. The Lusk report says, in fact, the only scientific, concrete, and perfectly systematic scheme of socialism is the scheme of Karl Marx. This is the basic of materialism inherent in the present-day socialism, for its antagonism to religion, to ethics, and to all idealism based on principles that do not relate to purely material life or wealth interest. Next highlighted chapter here, the Methodist turned socialistic. If the great voice of John Worsley, with its call to Christianize individual souls, should finally be stilled by the voice of Karl Marx, with its call to class war, disguised as a call to preach the social justice of economic justice, not only Methodism, but the whole world will suffer. Ominously, the socialist Christian Social Action Movement of Chicago, Methodist Church headquarters, says of its opportunities for teaching socialism, communism. Our most fruitful field of accomplishment, we believe, to be within and through the agency of the church, of which we are a part. It is difficult to overemphasize the significance to the social and economic movement in America if the Methodist Church should be one to wholehearted advocacy and support of the social gospel. To this endeavor, we pledge ourselves. So the Methodist Church is embracing socialism, created by the communists, created by the Zionists, created by the secret society Illuminati, high-level Freemasons, and other secret societies, as a tool to get their global world order. Methodists Turned Socialistic is the title of an article written by socialist Chaz Weber, jailed in a radical strike in 1930 and defended by the ACLU, which appears in the socialist Garland Fund-aided World Tomorrow of the July 1933. In it, he facilitates the annual conference of the ME Church held at the Central Church, Brooklyn, New York, for its reports on the necessity of social change. Where have we heard that before? From capitalism to a socialistic economic system, and says that the motion to change the words social ownership, complete socialism, in the final report to social control just barely passed. He says this debate clearly showed that the majority of the members of the New York East Conference of the Methodist Church are convinced that capitalism must be brought under some form of social control. The Northeast Ohio Conference of the Methodist Church exhibited similar tendencies when socialism, socialized ownership, and control of the country's financial and industrial system as a substitute for capitalism were recommended. Associated Press report, September 20th, 1932. Other conferences have likewise adopted communistic, socialistic resolutions. The Methodist Federation for Social Service is headed by Bishop Francis J. McDonald, socialist, ACLU, etc., and its bulletin is edited by Harry Ward, a radical fame, and Winford Chappell, frankly, of the Communist Party Campaign Committee. As an ex-communist said to me, most of these bulletins sound like the Daily Worker, only more so. That would be a communist revolutionary newspaper pamphlet. On April 15th, 1932 bulletin, which I have, not only frankly admitted Federation Corporation with communist organizations, but under the heading, "Is it a coincidence?" said, the nature of the membership of the Federation and the penetration of the church by this movement is indicated in part by the fact that entirely without design 1/3 of the Delaware Conference membership belonged to the Federation. This overlapping included every member of the Commission of the Modern Business and Industry, 10 of the 14 commission chairmen, and 2 secretaries of the Board of Foreign Missions, who were largely responsible for the conference, and the presiding officer, the president of the Federation. Of the call to action, which had just then resulted in the formation of the Chicago of the Socialist Methodist Christian Social Action Movement, it is also proudly observed as the most of the sponsors were members of the Federation. Concerning the Federation's financial support, it said the Rock River Conference had originated and systematically used the plan of donating 0.5% of the preacher's salary, including house rent, to the Federation for its socialist and communist cooperating activities, and that Philadelphia used it in modified form. The editorial of Dr. E.P. Clark, editor of the Riverside Daily Press, and himself a prominent Methodist layman, is reprinted in the National Republic of the October 1933, and to quote from it, "The Methodist Conference at Long Beach adopted resolutions urging the pardon of Mooney. The evidence has been reviewed by 4 governors, Stevens, Richardson, Young, and Roth, and all of them refused to pardon Mooney." So some of these people got arrested for seditious activity, and the communists and apparently the churches that were joining them were calling for this guy to be pardoned. The courts have also acted unfavorably on his case in several hearings. The average citizen may well give some heed to the findings of these various investigations, and it looks as if the Methodist Conference went far afield in seeking some subject on which to adopt resolutions. So I have a short clip to play right now, seeing somebody cranked up a lawnmower, of Eustace Mullins kind of explaining to us who the Zionists, communists, and all these organizations are. Take a look at this clip. Rick Miracle here with another review of a video that I found on archive.org. Eustace Mullins' New History of the Jews. The Holocaust Explained. Listen to a few minutes of this.
And that is, what is your interpretation of why we had the 9/11 bombings of the Twin Trades Towers? And we'll try to tie this in with money. What do you think?
We can do that very easily.
Go for it.
The money masters were getting a little nervous because we had had a war for a while, and they have to have wars to keep the people occupied and to have enemies and to face death, so that they don't have time to think about anything. And so they decided that they had, in order to keep the government in power, they had to have terrorism. And I have written an article some years ago called "The Necessity of State Terrorism." And the fact is that the modern state cannot exist without terrorizing the people. Not its enemies, but its own people. You don't have to terrorize your enemies, because usually they're working with you anyway. But you do have to terrorize your own citizens. 9/11 was a bald-faced attempt to terrorize the American people, and it was advertised as that. They said, this changes the whole world forever. That when 2 office buildings collapsed in New York City through demolition, the story about the airplanes burning them down to the ground is total nonsense, as the New York City Fire Department was the first to acknowledge that the whole story was a fantasy. And they've continued to do that ever since. And there's never been an investigation of 9/11, and no one has ever been arrested for it. But Larry Silverstein had bought the buildings a few weeks before they suddenly collapsed, and he got double indemnity, a double payment. He sued them for $3.5 million, and he got $7 million because he claimed that each building was hit by a separate airplane, and therefore they were separate incidents. And the insurance companies, incredibly, bought this rather naive supposition. And made him double money.
Sounds like Larry Silverstein's name sounds a little bit Jewish to me.
Well, it's quite Jewish. He was actually, he just represented some other people. He was kind of a small-town real estate operator in the New York area. And this guy, from nowhere, suddenly became the owner of the 2 biggest office buildings in the world.
Oh, just kind of overnight,
overnight such a situation. And the fact is that Larry Silverstein barely had money enough to buy a hot dog, much less the 2 biggest office buildings in the world. So there was a little uneasiness about this mysterious figure who suddenly owned the World Towers. And then when they slid down in controlled demolition, because if you see any pictures of the, and I have people have sent me videotapes of it, the way those buildings came down was the same way that they've been blowing up buildings in Las Vegas for years.
Yeah,
Control. They
control.
sink from the top down. They sink very gracefully right down to the ground.
Yeah, it's called controlled demolition.
Well, I think there's a firm in New York that really did the job. It's called Demolition Corporation.
Well, I've heard that the Israeli Mossad was a big part of that whole program in the CIA.
Well, yes, that was all done, and it took a lot of planning, and it took a lot of months before they were able to bring it off. And as no one's ever been questioned about that. And in fact, the Congress of the United States actually performed a very exhaustive 9/11 investigation, and they concluded they didn't find out one thing about it.
That was a big phony baloney routine.
Well, that was the greatest cover-up of all time.
Yeah.
But the people were satisfied because an investigation had been made, and they didn't find anything about it, so that meant nobody would ever know anything about it, because there would never be another investigation.
Well, let me ask you this. You know fair well about the Pearl Harbor incident. The
Well, there
Pueblo...
were 6 investigations of Pearl Harbor during World War II, and they all came to exactly the same conclusion, that Kimmel and Short were the only persons who were responsible, and that they failed to prepare for the Japanese invasion.
Well, that seems like Pearl Harbor was a incident that brought us into World War II with the Japanese.
Oh, yes.
And
with Hitler also.
And the Pueblo incident was the one that brought us into war with the North Koreans.
That's exactly right.
Yeah, and we have the blowing up of the Maine, and we have all kinds of these little, the bombing of the Lusitania. There's all kinds of little things on the end of the stick that the Marxist Zionists use to tickle with the Americans' mentality to get them conducive to fighting these foreign wars. Now, what about 9/11? Was that another Pearl Harbor?
It was greeted as a Pearl Harbor at the very time. The press covered the 9/11 incident, and they said this is another Pearl Harbor. And apparently it was.
Go watch this video, only 21 minutes. Unbelievable information. Archive.org. There are numerous Eustace Mullins videos, documents, and books, all for free. So you can see whether it's the pro-communist posters of 1920s to the 30s, and the huge uproar across America about the infiltration of our country by the communists, which is the Zionist elitist banksters, who are now bringing us the state of Israel and rebuilding King Solomon's temple. Same people, same purpose, prophesies to come, anti-God, anti-Christian. Infiltrating the churches. I'll continue on with this book here. For centuries of human progress and recession, it has been a controversial question as to the supremacy of the church or the state. But the Methodists apparently have no fear of stepping over the line. The action on the Mooney question might seem to line up with the Methodists with an unsavory and violent element of Russia and America. Other resolutions were of similar dubious propriety: to issue its demands upon the mayor of Los Angeles to abolish the Red Squad of police. So the Methodist Church was trying to get the mayor of Los Angeles to get rid of the police attack on the communists. Sedition. And look what they've done to LA now. It's deteriorating. The whole world. They're sucking money out of the United States like it was a giant vacuum cleaner, and they're not taking care of our country, repairing bridges and infrastructure and everything. Somebody has a different motivation with all the resources of this country. Not to mention the billions and untold billions, maybe trillions, given to Israel in aid, using the money to pretty much buy up the whole world. True or false? Is it hate speech to talk about this threat to America? Is it hate speech to be patriotic? So the Methodist Church wanted the Los Angeles mayor to get rid of the Red Squad police, foe of the communist rioters, and to investigate the Better American Federation. They come up with these names, these communist organizations that want to destroy our country, with names like Better American Federation. And they're not really aimed at making America a better country. And other organizations outside of church affiliation is hard to reconcile with the teachings of the gentle carpenter from Nazareth, which the church is supposed to further. So the Methodist Church is supposed to be preaching Christianity, love thy neighbor and all this, but it's going out of its way to support the communists who want to destroy the church. This goes to show you, nobody's safe from these people who are full of ambition and greed and other kinds of mental illnesses. The Methodist Church is probably the most powerful of all religious dominations. It has done a marvelous good, but when their conference presumes to rule on things religious, moral, and political, without regard to the courtesy or courts of justice, we fear the church's popularity is endangered, especially with the youth of the land. The Communist Daily Worker on May 13, 1933, under the heading Negro Bishop Black Back, Negro Bishops Back ILD, Fight says, the General Board of the Colored Methodist Episcopal Church in session in Jackson, Tennessee, with 8 bishops and 9 general officers, with more than 250 pastors and lay representatives throughout the U.S., went on record. The resolution reads in part, the bench of the bishops and the General Board of the Colored Methodist Church in annual session desire to issue the following statement to the nation with reference to the Scottsboro and Peterson cases in Alabama and Angelo Herndon case in Georgia. We feel it our duty to call upon our entire congregations throughout the nation to contribute funds and moral support to aid in such able defense as shown by the International Labor Defense Organization, and that such donations to be given concurrently and funds sent to the designated committee and in turn to the headquarters of the International Labor Defense, a communist organization. Godless Moscow's communist organization, using this means to hook Christians, Elias Contral, Holy Springs, Mississippi, C.H. Phillips, she's naming names, Cleveland, Ohio, R.C. Carter, Chicago, R.T. Brown, Birmingham, Alabama, J.C. Martin, Memphis, J.A. Hamlet, Kansas City, J.W. McKinley, Sherman, Texas. The colored people are a sincerely religious race. As long as they stayed in Africa unchristianized, they remained, as did pagan white men, savages. Their pagan brothers in Africa today are savages, while in a comparatively few years, under the opportunities of the American government and the inspiration of Christianity, the American Negroes have acquired professions, property, banks, homes, produced a rising class of refined, home-loving people. This is far more remarkable than that many Negroes are still backwards. The Reds play upon the Negroes' love of their own people and represent them as persecuted in order to inflame them against the very white people who have in reality given to the colored race far greater opportunities than their fellow Negroes would have given them in Africa today. So I will say this. If they do gain control of America and bring us a revolution and the Noahide laws, the laws of the land, and banning Christianity, and bring us this global world order, all people that are not party to these elites, not part of the elite groups, but all of us will be going backwards and living like savages. And you can see that like in the Hunger Games movie. They want to take away property rights and people's opportunities to work and gain wealth. Whether you're black or white, red or yellow, it doesn't matter. These people are against all of us. And they play us off on one another, like it says here. Only recently, the U.S. government was protesting slave holding by any colored officials in Liberia. So the U.S. government back then was fighting other countries that had slaves. The Reds look upon the Negroes as their greatest hope. So the communists are looking at the Negroes, it says here, as their greatest hope for success. They want them to do their dirty work in stirring up bloody revolution and to bear its brunt. Then whether the Reds win or lose, the Negroes will be the losers, for the Sovietation is slavery. So when they Sovietize, like the Soviet government after the Bolshevik Revolution, there's a lot of death, and the people who are still there work on farms or factories as slaves. That says see L.G. Strug, Negro RTS, page 188. So she's referencing a document on this. The U.S. Fish Report says, the task of the communist among the Negro workers is to bring about a class consciousness and to crystallize this in independent class political action against the capital class, to take every possible advantage of occurrences and conditions which will tend to develop race feeling with the view of utilizing racial antagonism. At every opportunity, the attempt is made to stir up trouble between the white and the Negro races. And we know that now with terrorism, with these bombings and shootings, and even the phone calls to Jewish synagogues in America. They're trying to get the people to believe that they need to disarm we the people. And they're going to make it so crazy with the social conditioning and deception and propaganda and all the false flags. I wouldn't be surprised if the people will beg for the global world order. And these people, these communists, Zionists, secret societies, Illuminati, etc., 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 these elitists, they'll stop at nothing to do what they're doing, to attain their goals. And they've said that. Who was it that said, either through peaceful means or by violent means, we will have our new world order? The Negroes are made to believe that the communists practice complete racial and social equality, and that only when a communist government is set up in the United States will the Negroes obtain equality and freedom from exploitation by the white bosses in order to attract and impress the Negro. The communist makes a point of encouraging mixed social functions where white women communists dance with Negro men and white men communists dance with Negro women. It is openly advocated that there must be complete social and racial equality between the whites and the Negroes, even to the extent of intermarriage. And there's no doubt about what I'm going to say next. But if you go to Theodore Herschel's book, The State of Israel, the planner of Zionism, he says explicitly, quite clearly, that there never can be any reconciliation between the Jewish people and the non-Jewish people. And they prefer to remain isolated and have no intermarriage. This is between the Jewish people and the non-Jewish people. And when these people immigrating to Israel today, Jewish people from all over the world, the ones who have intermarried with non-Jewish people are barred from immigrating to Israel. So it's strictly forbidden. Meanwhile, as you see in these pages, and they're bringing in all kinds of different people into the U.S. and all the European countries, they're forcing a mixed society, an integration of all cultures and races into one. They're forcing it. But they still will exclude themselves today. They plan on being the aristocrats, the elites of the world. And they've said it again and again and again, and I've mentioned it many times and shown where they've said it. And I have some other documents, and you'll see it's in writing, it's plain. They are the aristocrats. They are the intellect. The rest of us are not. We all should be thankful for everything they have done. To me, it's some kind of psychopathical mental illness some of these people have. And it must be anybody who would, desire to be in the Church of Satan and sacrifice humans in these Illuminati cults and other organizations. There's got to be something seriously wrong mentally. They need to be, they're probably possessed by demonic entities. They grow up that way. You can't leave that component of this conversation out. Look what they've done with World War I and World War II and 9/11 and the killing of people and machine gun fire and bombs and so much more, crashing the economy, people losing their entire fortunes again and again. I think 8 times since 1913 when these people took over the USA money supply. They've caused depressions and recessions, and everybody across the country loses all that they have worked for. They do it intentionally. They do not want the rest of us to gain any wealth, power, or influence. They hate Christianity. They are godless, or they're into the demonic worship, sacrificing humans like the Bohemian Grove, and all the other symbols I've mentioned every single time. With the Super Bowl halftime shows, Emmys, Grammys, with those Indiana Jones kinds of rituals. Just go watch them. Look it up on YouTube. Satanic ritual during the Emmys, during the Grammys, during the Super Bowl halftime show. Just look up those keywords. Satanic rituals during the Super Bowl. Satanic rituals during the Emmys, Grammys. And American Idol, Eurovision. Bridge openings. The goddess of destruction, Shiva, Kali, put on the Empire State Building. The archways of Baal, 1,000 of them all over the country. Baal, the devil, the demon, B-A-A-L. Why would the United Nations put 1,000 of these archways, portals to another dimension, with incantations on them, magic symbols and sayings? It's real, and these are the tactics they're using to destroy the world that we know. So it seems. Put yourself in the Negro's place. Would you not be flattered by Dr. Title's act of putting over a Negro social equality plank in the 1932 General Methodist Conference in Atlantic City, following similar action by the Federal Council of Churches, even though you knew in your heart that social equality is guided entirely by human desires, feelings, and that no law or plank can alter this? Neither a white nor a colored person will invite another person to supper in his home unless he wishes to do so. Sociability is won, not forced. Force on this point only engenders real antagonism, even bloodshed. And on that note, I will say, and I'm sure people have heard this said before, I have black friends. I've been a businessman most of my life. Worked 10 years at an aerospace company. I have people, friends and clients from India, from Iran, from Japan, China, Vietnam. I know that there are gay people that I know, even family members. I don't hate anybody. I think that's how most of us are. We just want to get along. But apparently there are these forces here that want to destroy the world we know it. And take all that we've worked for through Christianity, and I'm not going to deny other religions and Buddhism, Hinduism, and Muslims. Those people, they want civilized societies and realities. They don't want death and destruction. Sociability is won, not forced. Force on this point only engenders real antagonism, even bloodshed. To quote the Chicago Tribune report of May 8, 1932, concerning this conference headed Racial Question, JAR's Methodist Church Session, Dr. Title's resolution stated that future general conferences will be held only in cities where there is no segregation of racial groups, no discrimination in hotels, hotel lobbies, hotel dining rooms, restaurants, and elevators. So there probably was back then ignorant people, and they did have discrimination, but they were playing on people's desires for the wrong reasons. In his argument for the passage of the resolution, Dr. Title, stating that wording of his resolution followed closely a resolution recently adopted by the Federal Council of Churches. Such possible inability to find a city that would entertain the conference, Dr. Title said, would focus the attention of church and nation in the cause of racial equality. The Methodist Church South seceded from the Northern Church on the slavery issue nearly a century ago. It was pointed out in debate that the passage of this resolution would forever end all possibility of reunion between the two American branches of Methodism. Dr. Title went out of his way to solicit support for Jourdain, a colored candidate for alderman, but not of Title's ward. He signed the letters sent out for this purpose during the 1932 spring campaign, and Jourdain was elected. The time was when Methodism, in its zeal for personal purity, frowned upon dancing. Some Methodists nowadays who are little opposed to dancing, even in a church, were a bit surprised, however, when several colored men were introduced into circle dances at a dance given at a parish house of Title's church, were thus forced upon young white girls as partners. An ME Methodist Guild member whose daughter attended this dance reported that she was phoned when she phoned the assistant pastor. About this, he said that these colored men had been invited by Dr. Title himself, one of them being the son of a classmate of his at college, who felt that it was now time that the young people learned to mingle with other races. God created separate races, but communists insist upon racial intermixture and intermarriages. The great American colored man Booker T. Washington voiced the sentiment of the best elements in both races when he said that races should be as separate and distinct as the fingers of a hand and as united for the service of all humanity. Why should either race wish to lose its distinctive characteristics? Neither the races nor the sexes can ever be equal. They will always be different and have distinctive functions to perform in life. Most shocking is the consistent procession of red and outright communist posters and notices which disgrace the bulletin board of this gorgeous Methodist church, coupled with the fact that the minister himself is a book editor of the National Religion and Labor Foundation and responsible for the distribution of such communist literature as Toward Soviet America by W. Z. Foster, Little Lenin Library, Inc. So the minister of this church was a book editor and propagating literature towards a Soviet America. So what do you think? Has America been infiltrated? All this stuff about New Age and equality and liberty and progressive and Christians and hate speech. You think they're just pushing the envelope and pushing the envelope and just waiting for one day when a lot of Christians rise up and say, enough is enough. You can't sexualize our little children. You can't teach first graders about oral sex and who knows what else in explicit sexual education and put in their minds that they don't have to be a boy just because they happen to have the boy sexual organs. They can be a girl and vice versa. So you can get books like this, The Red Network, and go watch Eustace Mullins' videos and watch my other videos, Elizabeth Dilling and the other book I went over, The Plot Against Christianity. All this stuff I've been talking about appears to be true. And I believe I'm a patriotic American, and I believe if I was in Germany, I'd be a patriotic German. If I was in Britain, I'd be a patriotic British citizen. France, Africa, anywhere. We should all love ourselves and our neighbors and our countrymen and our countries, and we should all, if we all learned by Jesus' teachings that we are to love one another and not fight each other, it'd be a better planet. But the communists, the Zionists, the secret society, the elitists, do not want that. They brought us World War I, World War II, Pearl Harbor, 9/11, probably President Kennedy's assassination, and the assassination of many people, and the destruction and the suffering is going on and on. The ships over there off the coast of Iran right now, and the threats to Venezuela, and Brazil joining Russia and China, and threats in the news last week. The Army's Big Six weaponized programs to annihilate China and Russia. Who are these people who are controlling our country and put that insanity kind of news in the Associated Press or routers, and then people like YouTube taking videos on these topics down, calling people who are exposing it haters, and even on Yahoo, where I have my email, one of my emails, wanting me to sign some kind of new pledge and oath that I started looking into, and I said, I'm not signing this and agreeing to this. So they are trying to get everybody locked in. They do have beast computers, and they're collecting data on us, and they installing all kinds of technologies in 5G, and everything is moving forward, like I said, a freight train. And the only way we can change it or stop it is by waking up. Thank you for watching my video, Rick Miracle Reporting.